Everybody, and welcome to the second Friday night reading of the 2018-2019 year. Our next Fridays at Westminster event will happen very soon, on Friday, January 11th, 2019. It features the poet Kate Rushin and the jazz bassist Nat Reeves, who is a professor at the Hart School of Music, and his all-star band called State of Emergency. A combination poetry reading and jazz concert. I can't imagine a better way to start the new year. Can you? So you want to be sure to put that date on your calendar. Friday, January 11th, right here or in the theater. We're not sure yet. So pay attention on our website. Let me thank Maureen Goldfarb and Kristen Ford and Marina Russ Connor for generous grants that make these events possible. This is the 10th year of Fridays at Westminster series, and it's a series of 6 readings and 3 concerts every year. And without the support of our donors, none of this would be possible. So I'm going to get things started right away by introducing all 3 writers at once. Up first will be Abby Davis, a junior here and a member of this year's creative writing class. I was lucky enough last year to have Abby as a student in my AP English Language and Composition class. This year, Abby has been sharing her works in progress with me, and to be honest, she has already produced an astonishing variety of poems, essays, and stories. In my view, Abby has a very special gift in her precocious ability to control narrative structure and narrative voice, to go along with a pretty fertile imagination. Abby will be followed by English teacher Terrance McCaffrey. Mr. McCaffrey joined the English department this year after years of teaching at Mercy High School in Middletown, Connecticut. He is an accomplished poet who has published his poems in a variety of journals and magazines. Mr. McCaffrey also directs a writers group for the Connecticut Poetry Society's Farmington Valley chapter, a group which happens to include former Friday night reader and West Hartford Poet Laureate Ginny Lowe Connors. It's a small world. Mr. McCaffrey's poems seem simple on the surface, but because of his wonderful sense of rhythm and the magical ways he manipulates the insides of words, they open into surprising and often profound visions of the world we live in. Finally, we will hear from our guest writer, Gina Barreca. Almost everyone knows Ms. Barreca as one of the funniest writers in America through her weekly column in the Hartford Courant. And as our students have discovered by studying Ms. Barreca's essays and columns, she is indeed very funny, but she is also very smart. Her essays and columns are dotted with pithy observations about the human condition and deep insights into the hows and whys of human behavior in the 21st century. From an English teacher's standpoint, she is also a skillful and resourceful writer, and therefore an excellent role model for our students. Personally, I see Ms. Barreca as a master of what used to be called the familiar essay. Familiar essays are characterized by a conversational tone, a sometimes rambling structure, and content centered on the meaning of ordinary experience. The writer Ann Fadiman, who I think still teaches at Yale, who is another practitioner of the form, says of the familiar essay that while critical essays have more brain than heart, and personal essays have more heart than brain, familiar essays have equal measures of both. And that seems to me to describe Ms. Barreca's essays perfectly. So this is going to be, for me, a very special evening indeed. So they're going to come up one after another, and we're going to listen to what they have to say to us. So we're going to start with Abby Davis.
Thanks, Mr. Service. This is a story that I wrote a couple weeks ago for my creative writing class. I was told that when I woke up, I wasn't able to do much. I couldn't eat, they said, and only drank from an IV bag. I couldn't speak or write or draw, or communicate at all really, except for slight movements of my eyes and my head. I couldn't do anything on my own. At first, I didn't even know my own name. My brother told me that I was a shadow of my former self, but that didn't help me remember who I was. I was a blank slate, my memory wiped clean like a burnt computer drive. He tried to show me by bringing photos that I had kept in a journal. I didn't like looking through them at first. I felt like I was intruding on somebody else's life, studying their existence and trying to imagine what their life was like, trying to step awkwardly into their shoes. He showed me my unfinished artwork, half-painted canvases with exciting colors, brushstrokes carefully crafting something that I could no longer picture. They sat in piles against the bleak walls of the hospital room, with paint palettes tucked behind them, in case I became motivated to finish a painting. They all looked foreign to me, and a bit intimidating. While I was alone in the otherwise empty room, I would look through them, sitting up in bed with a needle stuck in my arm, my unsteady hand feeling the different coats of smooth paint, tracing the faint pencil marks still visible beneath the unfinished layers. I wondered what this would have looked like if I had gotten a chance to finish it. My brother kept his distance from me for a while after I came home from the hospital. It must have scared him how much the routine at home had changed. I didn't recognize our house, other family members, or any of the keepsakes in my room. But eventually, we became close again. He would dig through our parents' attic to find projects I had done in 4th grade, the black cat ears I had worn as part of a Halloween costume in middle school, a report card from high school. He would tell me stories of when I was a kid. I soaked it all up with fascination, but it felt alien to do so. It was as if my brother was telling me about a great aunt that I had never met. It was interesting to hear, but hard to imagine a different life in a distant past. I tried anyway. I refound my favorite cafe. I reappreciated my favorite sweatshirt. I reloved reading my favorite books, especially since I got to experience them again without knowing the ending. I slowly felt like I was regaining who I was, finding my personality and my place in life through my trinkets, through my history, and through my rediscoveries. But for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to relearn how to paint. You used to spend hours sitting in the garage painting, my brother told me with a sad smile. You would shelter yourself from the rest of us by stapling blankets and a plastic tarp to the ceiling to create a barrier. You wouldn't let anyone else see what you were working on until it was just the way you liked it. What did I paint? I asked him. Whatever inspired you that day. Sometimes you'd paint flowers, sometimes sunsets, sometimes people, sometimes abstract shapes and colors. My brother chuckled, reminiscing. I asked you once if you would paint a portrait of me, and you said no, because for you, painting was a beautiful expression of who you were, and you didn't want to paint something as ugly as me. I said that. I was startled. I'm sorry. He laughed. It's fine. You were 12. We used to insult each other like that all the time. But either way, I didn't ask again after that. I looked at the paintbrushes and the easel and the paint-splattered floor and the empty canvases that lined the back wall, waiting patiently. I sighed. I didn't go back into the garage after that. I didn't like to look at the scene. It haunted me, reminding me that, even as my life began to return to normal, there would always be a part of my past that I couldn't recover, that I was too scared to recover. I worried that I wouldn't know how to paint, that I wouldn't be able to express myself the same way I used to, that I'd never be who I truly was. Who was I anyway? I wasn't a collection of paintings or favorite mundane objects. I knew that. But who was I if I didn't know how to express myself? Like my brother had said, my paintings represented my feelings, and my creativity and my passions. If I lost my ability to express those, was I really anyone at all? It was a few months later before I decided to brave the back corner of the garage. It looked exactly the same as when I had last seen it. Even though it was unnecessarily taking up a lot of space, no one in my family wanted to touch anything, and up until this moment, that included me. I carefully picked up the tarp that was sagging on the floor, lifting it over my head, and then let it drop behind me. The confined space felt like an attic, an unventilated area where the smell of paint lingered, even after being long dry. I breathed in deeply, trying to find a connection, trying to stimulate my brain to remember what it felt like to create art. I sat on the stool in front of the easel, absent-mindedly twirling a paintbrush through my fingers. I put it back, stood up, and walked around in slow circles as if I were lost in a thick, hazy mist, unsure of where to go. I found myself in front of a small blank canvas, leaning against the wall next to a set of unopened paints. I picked them up and brought them to the center of the room, placing them on the floor, the canvas propped up against the easel and the bottles of paint lined up off to the side in no particular order. I sat down cross-legged in front of the easel, My fingers hovered over the paint options. I couldn't choose, so I decided to start with the one farthest to the right. It was lavender. I opened it and breathed in the strange yet oddly familiar smell of acrylics. I reached for the brush again. Holding it felt surreal, foreign even. I held it delicately, like a pencil. I tried gripping it like a 2-year-old about to vigorously scribble with a crayon. It didn't feel right either way. So I placed it back and, not knowing what else to do, stuck my finger into the paint. It felt cool, almost as if I were sticking my fingers into refrigerated jello. I swirled the paint a little, coating my skin with the color of spring flowers and fragrant soaps. I slowly lifted my finger out of the paint, laying the excess drip back into the bottle, and, once again, not knowing what else to do, pressed my finger onto the center of the canvas, feeling the thick papery material bend slightly under the pressure, and smeared the paint until I had a light purple horizontal streak. I started opening more and more colors of paint, lying them out in front of me in a messy array. My ring finger became a forest green, my thumb a midnight blue, my pinky a shade of salmon, my middle a brilliant yellow. The canvas turned into a polychrome landscape. The trees were different shades of blue, the sky was tinted emerald, and the hue of the background mountains would match a cranberry sorbet if such a thing existed. And right in the center, a lavender sunrise. I closed the lids to the paint bottles and wiped the wet paint from my hands onto my jeans. I sat in front of the canvas for a while, admiring my artwork, captivated by the power of creation. I felt overwhelmingly content, my eyes searching over every inch, every uneven blob, every smudge, and finding no imperfections. I looked around the room and started to imagine myself sitting at this easel. In front of me, all the paintings in their unfinished stages. I felt in my soul a swell of pride. These paintings were my creations. I had made these. Even if I didn't remember, each individual stroke of paint at one point represented who I was at the time that they were made. This room, these bottles of paint, this gallery of art was my biography. This was who I was. Hey, I haven't smelt paint in here in a long time, my brother said, entering the room by sliding through the gap between the tarp and the back wall. I was feeling inspired, I told him, grinning. I'm glad. What did you paint? I looked at the canvas filled with mismatched colors, a fantastical scene, shrugging. I don't know. I squinted at the canvas, tilting my head, analyzing my work. An alternate reality, maybe. One where I don't know how to paint. He chuckled. I think you're doing just fine. Thank you.
My first poem is called By the Overpass. We stared politely at the dead doe lying in a bed of aster by the blackened overpass, at its glassy ebony eyes searching, at its splayed pink tongue offering beneath the nuisance of garish August sun. Chicken skin, I might have said at the tongue, just as distant cattails began to bow mournfully in a separate breeze, signaling the first nadir of the boy's life. The thickening thought of the unnatural order of things closed in hairless breast. He ventured to recite over the dissonant sound of passing traffic a prayer about giving back to the earth, blistering forward in life, caring enough. Despite our growing doubts that we could ever move past such tragedy as metal meeting muscle, one ceasing another's soft breath. Thanks. Learning to swim. My son dog paddles over the scratchy string of blue and white buoys and into the murk of the deep end, oblivious to oblivion, water overwhelming water, the lesser body losing. He jerks across the surface, his skinny limbs raking the darker depths, stirring the cold hardness of becoming. He looks the way most adults feel, all strain and struggle, desperate to stay afloat. Myself, I'm teetering on a sliver of vinyl liner in a 1984 t-shirt, forever watching, begging him with every inch he gains to stay just as he is, a boy, a ball player, aspiring author. Nights I've been finding him in our bed, so I carry his long body heavy with the weight of new worry back to his small blue room where he still dreams high-flying comic book dreams. But they're waning dreams, I know will someday disappear. Afternoon shadows spilled across the uneven pavers. He's spitting now, smiling. I think he's got it, the notion that progress takes work. His hand slaps the ladder's rung, and somewhere young sparrows pull and sweep from their nest. Sparks of water fly from his trunks as he shuffles for the shallow end, returning to where he started, a safe, clean neighborhood of childhood. When his face flashes with kindness, I feel like a fugitive with a stricken heart, knowing this will happen again, when he's older. This latest test of his will, this test of mine. All right, the next poem is it's kind of a trifecta. It's about tragedy, regret, hope, hopefully. It's called September Song. The rest of that year, the class worked in groups while my tired eyes fell upon your vacant desk where you used to bury yourself in the crux of your arm, the illicit streak of orange hair jetting through the atmosphere of your skull, and murmur you hated your mom. In the aisle, I'd laugh, hand back your crappy grades, scribbled in red with "see me after class," all straight and legible when I knew you wouldn't. So now, you've wound up sitting on the woodpile in my half-lit backyard, pink belt mark smiling around your neck. An idea adults would not own. I open the crucible, annotated and tattered, and find it still ominously dog-eared at the denouement. Must we convince ourselves that tragedy has a reward? I press my palm to this window, feel the cold of 1,000 souls who too are shards and warm folds of memory. I try to blink you away, but you only shine brighter. Then like magic, you slowly raise your hand, and after I call on you, September's song blossoms from your mouth, sewing you into an earthly remembrance. Some spring afternoon when I'm putzing around the trees behind the house, we might cross paths again. And if that happens, I promise I won't try to shake you. Instead, we'll work together and find you a new name. All right, one more. All right, estate sale. You came to Red Robin for the never-ending fries, but you're nowhere near hungry. You could vomit, actually, at the thought of strangers ransacking the house, picking his blues records, his tools, stacks of his half-read books, operating the electric bed where he clasped his face and kissed his lips, then hummed All for the Best, after which he wilted to just the body with a mouth. When you're done here, you'll return half your life sold. An emptiness will try to consume you. Birds will mean nothing. Not until you accept some comfort with the darkness, with those cold, guttural pangs settling in your chest, will you spy one nondescript morning a slant of light pooling near his desk in the corner room, dust motes swimming in a gilded stream. The whispered fact that not all of him is gone. Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi, Gina Barreca, and I'm honored to follow these two writers. They were terrific. Another round of applause. I expected them to be good, but I'll be honest, I didn't expect them to be that good. That was really impressive. Thank you both. I'm delighted to be here. I was trying to remember the last time I spoke in Westminster School. It was a while ago. And before the people who were the students here now, anywhere near being born. And when the rest of us, there's a genuine reaction from the front row. And when some of the people who were here, who read the column in the Hartford Courant, were certainly around. And so I'm glad that we come together for this kind of evening, and that young people could sprawl on the floor and sit on tabletops, and that none of them have their devices on, because that would never happen in a school as good as this. So that nobody is doing that business that some of my students do, where they look down at their feet and seem to be looking at their feet, and they're actually engaged. And I actually began my classes by telling all of my students at the University of Connecticut, where I've been teaching for 31 years, that there are no devices. And some of them, because I teach a 2.5-hour seminar, have never been separated from their devices for 2.5 hours. They have never been without a device for 2.5 hours. And since I've been teaching for 31 years, I can see the thought bubbles over the heads of students. You know, I can actually read, I can see what every one of you is thinking. While you're sitting here, it's like a party trick. I can actually go through the room and do it. And it is astonishing, so that it's like, don't put it's on the floor. I can see you looking on the floor. I can see you looking in the bag. I can see you looking in your pocket. I can see you doing all of this stuff, because everybody does the same thing all the time. And that's one of the things that makes writing interesting. So I'm going to actually begin. Where's Ariana? There's my friend Ariana, the young woman who came to pick me up to bring me over from the Simsbury house, 1820 house. Metro Beast, I noticed Metro Beast. The 1820 house. Went to the same undergraduate college that I did, which is Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. She graduated in 2014, is that right? I graduated in 1979. I was actually in the class in 1979, but I left in 1978 because I finished early. Because I didn't, anybody here go to Dartmouth besides Ariana? Anybody here from that place in Hanover, New Hampshire? I was, maybe like some of you will be, I was the first one in my family ever to go to college. I was the first girl from my family ever to graduate from high school in a timely fashion. It was not what girls in my neighborhood did, right? That was not on the agenda for girls in my neighborhood. If you read the column in today's Hartford Courant, I talked about the necessity for an education, and not so that you can go out and make money. If you just want to go out and make money, you can become a small arms manufacturer. You can become a gangster. You don't actually have to leave the neighborhood. You don't go to school to learn how to make money. You go to school to actually learn how to have curiosity, how to be interested in things, how to sit at the grown-up table and make a conversation, how to amuse yourself when other things aren't amusing you without having to look at a screen. That's what you get an education for. But my family didn't really understand that, right? So they would say, why are you going to college? What are you going to learn in college that you're not going to learn on the streets of New York? And there was one semester when I was taking human sexuality, urban education, the psychology of romance, and something like modern literature. And I thought there was nothing, technically, that I am learning in Dartmouth College that I could not learn on 11th Avenue, But I was a scholarship student, so no one was really worried about it. I mean, somebody else was picking up the bill. And it was an interesting moment, because when I got to Hanover in 1975, there were still 7 men to every woman. So it was a slightly imbalanced campus. So I talk a little bit about this. Now, for those of you in a book called Babes in Boyland, personal education, personal history, education, the Ivy League, which came out a while ago, but is still circling around. And I write this from the notebooks. Anybody in the room keep notebooks? Right? You write. It's not an actual notebook, you write stuff down electronically, but you keep notes. Most of this book is from the notebooks that I kept in high school and in college. So these are real conversations, and they're embarrassing. You ever look back, do you ever keep notebooks from when you were like 6th grade and 7th grade, and you look back at 6th and 7th grade and you think, how could I ever think that? That's how you feel when you get older, even about being older. I look back at notebooks I kept when I was 45, and I feel that way. But these are the notebooks that I kept when I first got to college. So this is what I talk about at the beginning. And these are really from the original parts of things, the original heart of what I was writing. Being a woman at Dartmouth in the 1970s, so I started in 1975, was like having a double major. You were not only a first-year student, you were also a co-ed. Is that even a word young people use anymore? You know what co-ed is? Is that a word? Yeah? Okay, it's still there. We have to get rid of that. A co-ed. You were not only a physics major or a government major, you were a female physics or government major, as if there was more estrogen in your system, and so that changed everything. More and less was expected of you. You had to prove yourself worthy of the college, but because of punishing rhetoric, often disguised as playfulness, Presumed success was impossible unless you were given a head start. Your achievements were also dismissed. You were not graded only by your professors, but by the boys on fraternity row. They would actually hold up numbers as we walked past, saying, you were 6, you were an 8, you were whatever. And I mean, it took us 2 years, but we finally started walking past with our numbers grading the fraternities we walked past. It still took a little bit of time. Alumni aged, as well as the freshman boys, told you the college never should have admitted women. That was what we heard all the time. Shouldn't have let women in. And you learned to answer, hey, they would say, when our grandfathers won here, there were no women. Westminster used to be an all-boys school, right?
Yep.
How long ago did it go co-ed? 1976? Two. Okay, so the same year Dartmouth went co-ed. That's interesting, because I got there 3 years later. So it was an interesting time. Do you have archives from that time? Yes? That somebody should do some senior project. You're pointing to faculty going, there are the archives from this time. But it'd be fascinating for somebody to do a research project about the school and what it was like to be both a boy and a girl here at those times. So these boys would come up to me and say, when our grandfathers went here, there were no girls. And for the first 3 years, I would try to explain why it was important to let, fine schools become coeducational. But by the 4th year, I said, when your grandfathers went here, there were no indoor lights. Sometimes things get better. And we realized that people would hear something, if you said it with a sense of humor, that they wouldn't hear if you made a long explanation. So I was asked by a lot of guys, are you a lesbian? Because only a lesbian would come to a boys' school. And I learned to say, if I were a lesbian, don't you think I'd go to a girls' school? And it wasn't until a friend of mine who was gay came up to me and said, honey, the only answer when somebody comes up to you and says, are you a lesbian, is, are you my alternative? And it doesn't matter what your sexuality is, it's always the correct answer. And I thought, I've used that line now, for years. And it's the same answer, it doesn't stop happening as you age. I was sitting at a bar, not that I would ever admit that anywhere else, I was sitting at a bar in Washington, D.C., with a very prominent politician, who I won't name because you probably would like the story to start out when I was sitting in a bar, and a woman who you would recognize. And we're women of a certain age. We're not out there looking for anything except good conversation, but we're sitting at the bar, and a guy our age, too old for work study, too young for cremation, my age, that just narrows the man down, my age, and he walks by, and we're, again, 6-year-old, we're sitting there, and he goes, you gals alone? And my friend looked at him and said, no, we're together, you're alone. And I thought, okay, I'm used to it. That's the answer from now on. So are you my alternative? You learned, or what I learned at this fine institution, was to undermine grim, tight-lipped, earnest, and inflexible traditionalism by being a tough cookie, by being a wise guy, by being a feminist. I'm one of the last people that people come up to and go, do you use the F word? And the F word is clearly feminist. My students come up and go, Dr. Barreca, it's like, it says feminist theory, you're really a feminist, but you're married, and like you have stepsons, and you have a brother, and you were raised by your dad, and it's like, how can you be a feminist? And the first thing I say is, stop talking like that. Because if you notice that still the very smart young women, a lot of people, right, who are going to run NASA and head like the medical associations of America, still speak like they're answering every question with a question. So my students will come in at the beginning of the semester and go, Dr. Barreca, you're my advisor? And I'll say, okay. Tell me your name. And they'll go like, Stephanie Smith? And I'll go, I don't know, dear. You tell me. Because if you can't even express with authority your own name, we gotta get some things right, okay? And but they're concerned about this because, and I'm worried, because still we associate traditional femininity in our culture without being able to make a declarative sentence, because we still want to be like cute, and we want to like make boys things like, you don't want to like overdo it and be too assertive, and so we just sort of like do this eye rolling thing, and we put all our weight on one foot. And for the boys in the class, this is where you get continuing education credits. Okay, I'm allowed to issue those, because this is also where girls start doing what is the fake silver bell tinkling laughter. And if you hear a girl that you're in the company of, and she goes like this, oh, you're really funny. She's not laughing. Because girls who really laugh don't go. Girls who are really laughing go, which is a different sound. So if you're telling what you think is a funny story about somebody getting an Audi reupholstered, and you really think this is a riot, and she's going, she's thinking, I have so much homework tonight. I haven't anything done. I'm not going to finish. I'm going to be up till 4 o'clock in the morning. But she's going, but if she's going, that's really it. That's great. Then she's laughing. So if you can take that home with you, and girls, if we can stop doing that. We have to stop making and stop dropping it. Just kidding. We have to stop making those noises that sound like we're talking to babies when we're talking to other people our age. Boys don't do this. Young men don't do this. Right? But girls, that's not going to get us into the White House. That's not going to get us elected into the Senate. If you're on the Supreme Court and somebody goes, what do you think? You go, I don't know. I think it's a really cute ruling. I don't know. That's not it. You have to learn how to speak up. So the young women in my classes, after they're at least in, I don't know, the 3rd, the 4th week, they'll come back to my office, and at least by this point they're in pods. They will have found their group and their tribe. And they'll come up and they'll go, okay, Professor Barreca, and their voices have leveled off, so I've earned my state salary, right? So they're like, okay, Professor Barreca, we understand that it's not really just about gender or sex, and obviously those are two different things, but that's an entirely different lecture. You know, gender is performative, sex is the sort of equipment that you're handed, and those things are now becoming flexible on our spectrum, and we all understand that, but this is really about gender and performance, and so that it's not just, it's the women, but it's any kind of group that's been sort of marginalized, it's any group that's been sort of pushed to the walls, that has never been able to actually been allocated their own voice, and it feels like with every generation needs to be told that they have the right to speak up. They need to be asked, they need to have permission to speak up, and if you have to request permission to have authority, then you don't have authority, and the traditions that you have in your own people, in your own group, don't get passed down, and you're always asking for somebody else to say, can I speak up, and you have to ask them to speak up, then you don't get the right to pass that down, and everything that's lost in every generation, that needs to be reassembled, then you don't get the power that's passed on, that those who are in the positions of power, in the sort of traditional avenues of power, the sort of the privileged positions of power, they don't have to do this. And so if we're going to do this, we need to make the lives better for our sons and our grandsons and our daughters and our granddaughters. But if we're going to make that happen, we understand we can't do it alone. And we can't ask the young men that we know to do that, because they have their own issues, given that the straitjacket of masculinity is as confining as the straitjacket of femininity. So we understand we need to go out there and do that ourselves. But if we do, will we ever date? And I think it's an excellent question. And I answer them honestly, and I say, dear, if you do date, when this happens, you will simply have a good relationship with whomever you choose, because it won't be someone who believes that making you watch Jackass the movie clips is the perfect evening in, right? Or from my age, it was the Three Stooges. Women don't like the Three Stooges? Do people know what the Three Stooges are? They're the guys who go, nyeh, nyeh, nyeh. You have never seen women go meet each other at a conference, at a wedding, at a convention, going up to each other going, nyeh, nyeh, nyeh. We haven't spent 3 months of our adolescence learning how to make fart noises. Okay? That is not what we do as teenagers. Okay? We learn to go, we learn how to do something else, and guys are doing this. It's just what we do. No woman has gone up to another woman at the beginning of a meeting and go, pull my finger. We don't do that. It is not how we bond. It's fine if you guys do this, but don't tell us if we don't do this, we don't have a sense of humor. Because women have a very different sense of humor than men. That's what my research has been on. Because I realize that when a guy says, I got something funny to tell you, you can go. You can hold up your watch, and they go, 3 blondes walk into a bar, and that's, you can go bada bing, bada boom, you can tell where it's going, right? A woman says, I got something funny to tell you. If you're smart, you'll sit down. You're gonna be there a long time. Because she's not gonna tell you a joke, right? Women don't really tell jokes, women tell stories. When a woman says, I got something funny to tell you, she's gonna tell you something that happened to her that day, okay? She's gonna say, okay, I wanted to get like a cup of coffee, and I know I shouldn't drink coffee because I really don't sleep all that well. I have a little bit of depression, and I'm trying to deal with it. But I figure, if you face depression and you actually deal with it, and I try to do decaf and calf, I mix them, but I have a coupon. I have a coupon for Starbucks. My cousin worked there this summer. Would you like the coupon? I'm really trying to get rid of it. And a boy who was sitting there is going, what am I hearing? She told me she was saying something funny. She's talking about coffee. I have no idea what she's talking about. I'm going to make a fart noise. I mean, it is really, it's a difference. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but women have been told, girls have been told, you don't have a sense of humor because we are not so amused by the scenes in Jackass, where the scenes that my students show me are the one where a young man walks across, I believe it's a crocodile or an alligator pit, in his BVDs. Yes, correct me, was it a crocodile or alligator pit? You remember which one? Which one?
Oh, it's a crocodile.
Crocodile, thank you for the clarification. You see, he's an educated young man. My amphibian life is just, I believe they're amphibians, I don't know what they are. And some big thing. Anyway, there's a boy who walks over the top of the crocodile pit in his underpants with pieces of raw chicken hanging out. And his friends are going, that's hilarious. And the boys come into class and go, watch this is really funny. Your specialty is humor, right? Watch this guy walk across the crocodile pit. And I'm going, that's not funny. That's not funny. Women would never say, let's put Barbara in Spanx and send her into the lion pit, okay? Let's see what happens to Barbara. If we don't do that, we don't do that. That is not how we amuse ourselves. Guys are going, let's see if he'll ever have children. I mean, this is not what we're doing. And this is what boys are doing. And they're saying this is funny. And then we're surprised that men and women don't want to go to the same movies. This is a shock to anybody. I'm going back to my booklet. Women at Dartmouth and similar institutions, of which this was once one, had to learn the rules and play by them in order to figure out how to change them. If you weren't born into the structure, then you have to play by it until you can figure out how to change it. Men of Dartmouth was a song that started, Men of Dartmouth give a rouse for the college on the hill. You can imagine how those words were changed, can't you? We learned quickly, as part of a very small community within a larger, older, entrenched community, how to find our voices and find ourselves. Finding your voice and finding yourselves is why writing matters. Because when you learn how to tell the truth, however uncomfortable it is, you learn what your truth is at that moment, and that truth can change. I don't agree with Shakespeare. You've read your Shakespeare sonnets, right? Let me nod to the marriage of true minds amid impediments. Love is not love which alters when an alteration finds or bends with the remover to remove. I don't think that's true. I think love can alter. I think you can be in love when you're young and then have it be real love, but that'll change. You can love somebody else differently when you're older. It doesn't mean it wasn't love when you had it. So you can disagree with Shakespeare, but you have to know Shakespeare in order to disagree with him. You have to know it backwards and forwards, and then you can make an argument. But if you just read it in the Spark Notes, it's going to give you a summary. Not that anybody here would ever do that.
No, not here.
So we learned to find our voices and find ourselves, and how to speak up and how to make trouble. We learned what it felt like to fail and to lose, and how it felt to succeed and triumph. We learned, in other words, what people are still learning today, how to challenge the institutions of power from within, and how to invent sites for ourselves even when no blueprint exists inside a granite hard establishment. And isn't it terrific that some of us, more grown up now, maybe wiser, maybe successful, maybe less nervous about how others will judge us, have been privileged enough to enjoy the last laugh. So that's the beginning of that. And so I told the truth about what it was like. And so there were just bits and pieces of conversations. So they're actually just called conversation in the book, directly from the journals. So boy, clearly interested in girl, who is equally intrigued. What perfume are you wearing? Do you like it? It's patchouli oil. It smells like dirt. Like dirt? No, not like filth. I didn't say you smell like filth, but whatever that patchouli stuff is, it smells like dirt. That's great. Not like filth. It's terrific. Were you raised by wolves? Didn't anybody teach you how to speak to a girl? And that was actually a conversation, right? That I had with a boy. That was the end of that conversation with that boy. Here's another conversation with a friend named Tiger. His nickname was Tiger. I asked Tiger why she doesn't want to meet the girl her older boyfriend dated. Aren't you at least curious to meet the woman he was involved with before he met you? They went out for a whole year. Nope, she replies. If his old girlfriend is beautiful, I'll feel insecure. If she's ugly, I'll feel indignant. My friend helps me understand that a person should not ask questions if the person does not want the answers. Okay? Here's one piece from a journal from 1973. One voice tells me I'm not the worst student in the world, and that other voices tell me to get out before I waste any more time. I never felt smart. I don't know which voice is right. My inner life is misshapen. If I move with confidence, it's only because I've compensated for the grotesque nature of my true self. Thinking of myself as good academically is like thinking of myself as thin, hard to get used to even when some kind of objective criteria, a scale or a decent GPA, or recording a successful score. That was hard to read, to go back and to think. I want to both smack that girl and give her a hug. Because it's like, aren't you supposed to be thinking, you're supposed to be reading a book now, as opposed to be thinking about yourself in all of this time. But that's what you think about. This is how this stuff works. So I'll read one bit because I want to take questions, right? That's part of the idea?
No, we can do that tomorrow.
Oh, we can do that tomorrow. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the stuff that matters to me. This is why work matters. What do you all want to do when you get out of here? Everybody wants work to pay off, to be successful. So this is an essay called Why Work Matters. What's your goal in life? I asked a cheerful young man at an alumni event. I want to retire by the time I'm 35. This is a snappy answer. He smiled, cocked his head as if auditioning to play George Clooney's kid brother, and waited for what he clearly expected to be my delight. His line was rehearsed, and he was close to 25. Obviously, it had played well in front of other audiences, but I wasn't impressed. Let me put it another way, I said. What kind of work would you like to retire? Right? Something creative. Something where my passions and my talents are showcased. I don't want some soulless, mind-numbing office job. That's what all my students say. I don't want a mind-numbing office job, a soulless office job. I was like, honey, you haven't had an office job. How do you know it's soulless and mind-numbing? Where did you get soul? Because you watched The Office like 4 times? Is this where your entire concept? It's like you work indoors, you get a desk, it's air conditioned, you get a paycheck. That's a good gig. Like, let's start with that being a good gig, right? So I said to this young man, have you ever had an office job? Is that how you know they're all soulless? Guy says, I don't need a 9 to 5 to know it. Do you need to work in a factory or dig ditches to know those are jobs you wouldn't want? He wasn't necessarily a fool, this young man, but he was either ignorant or innocent or both. And I thought about how his family, his college, and his culture had all failed him. How can you be a good boss if you've never had a boss? Work is absolutely essential, not only for self-knowledge, but also in pursuit of better communities. By encouraging this young man to believe in his own exceptionalism, right? Everybody's an exception. Everybody's an exception. Including in making him believe in his own exceptionalism, the adults who brought him up did him a disservice. By permitting him to think, as the old expression put it, that the world owed him a living, they might have made it much more difficult for him to earn. That's why, instead of searching for his vocation, he was standing on the world's platform, waiting for the fame train to arrive. He thought all he had to do was hail it by waving his arm. This was not the sign of an aristocratic household either, brought up by nannies and fawned over by tutors. This was a child of the suburbs, not of the landed gentry. Yet he made it obvious that he was meant for greater things than everyday work. He made it clear that he thought of tedious work as something done by others, by the ungifted, by the ordinary, by the common. And his mistake about work is what's common. My father worked in a small factory with his brothers-in-law and his sister. When the place couldn't compete with larger companies, they went out of business, and at 60, my age now, my father started working retail. When he was very ill at the end of his life, I asked my dad if he had any unfulfilled wishes, things he secretly would have liked to have done. He thought about it. I wish I could have been a mechanic. I would have really liked to work with cars. His last dreams weren't about voyages or extravagances. They were about other kinds of hard work he could have done and how he might have liked those jobs more. He would have preferred working on automobile engines to working on sewing machines. People once talked about the dignity of labor. Now labor is usually associated with birth, and dignity is usually associated with death. Birth and death are serious occasions, but work is also a big deal, or it should be. You spend more time at work than you do being born or dropping dead. How can you tell that being able to get a job and go to work are important? How do we know those things are important? Because for much of history, women and those marginalized by the culture were prohibited from doing it. That's how you can tell it matters, right? When they stopped people allowing to apply for those things. That's how you know it's important. Women, people of color, the very poor, and those being seen as of the wrong religion were barred from being able to walk through the gates and apply for certain jobs. These jobs remained not as much out of reach as they were out of bounds. Laws had to be passed so that hardworking people would be permitted the privilege of being able to get these jobs. There are a lot of things I wanted to say to this young man, the graduate, including, of course, one word, plastics. But all I said was that getting a job he didn't like would still be better than hanging around hoping to be discovered. Work is an essential part of life's conversation. If you sit at the grown-ups table, it should be an experience you're able to discuss firsthand, and it's okay if those hands are a little rough. Thank you. The next one is called the Hummingbird Effect. Sometimes it's not enough to be focused. Sometimes you need to accept help, and sometimes you need to be flexible. Once a ruby-throated hummingbird, which had flown more than 2,000 miles from Central America just to get to our neighborhood, got stuck in our garage. I live in Stores, just a couple miles from campus. He panicked, this hummingbird, and couldn't find his way out. Panic makes you lose your bearings and obliterates any view of your ultimate destination. You retain only a flickering awareness of reality. Feeling trapped and scared makes you lightheaded. When you're frantic, you'll do anything just to do something. Right? I mean, when you're really scared, you'll do anything. The urgency of chaos sends even instinct out the window, or makes it crash against the glass. Careening wildly into walls, the meticulously beautiful creature couldn't draw on skills that permitted him to fly directly over the Gulf of Mexico, or maneuver up, down, backwards, and forwards as he sipped his body weight in sugar water every day. I improvised with a broom, and my husband found a net, With small gestures, we encouraged the hummingbird to stop hitting his head against the ceiling. Finally, his extraordinarily tiny claws clasped the net, and Michael deftly stepped outside. After maybe 2 seconds of complete stillness, the bird flew off in a straight line into the treetops and disappeared. Although the episode ended happily, I'm sure the hummingbird is telling some tales to his avian companions. You'll say I'm projecting, I'm anthropomorphizing, right? You know that word, I'm anthropomorphizing the bird. And you're right. Not only do I sympathize with adjusting my own body weight, I also recognize the bird's desperation. I spent time, especially in my teenage years, subject to panic attacks. I say subject to panic attacks. I lived in an unsteady world. As a child, I was afraid to walk over grates. Again, I grew up in New York, the grates on the sidewalk, like over the subway. I was terrified of walking over those. They were everywhere. I was scared to walk over them because I was afraid of falling through. I was afraid that the subway cars I would ride on every day, they would run on parallel tracks. I was afraid they would collide. And I was afraid of dogs because I was afraid of being torn to pieces. My most normal childhood fear of being abandoned by my parents, which kids fear usually, was the only one that came true. My mother died when I was in high school. And I became afraid that I hadn't worried enough, and my panic attacks became worse. I was terrified, not just worried, but terrified of phone calls or letters that weren't answered immediately, because the last time I'd ever spoke to my mother was on the phone. And so anytime somebody didn't answer, I was panicked, and there were no cell phones then. So I had to go to a phone that was in the hall, a public phone, and wait to hear if anybody I was calling, and then other people would come. Okay? I wrecked relationships because I was afraid of ruining them. I would rather break up with somebody than be afraid that somebody would leave me. I would try to reach people, not only boyfriends, but also relatives and acquaintances, obsessively making contact until I could speak to them. Remember, this was even before answering machines or computers. Information passed most slowly, although that doesn't justify my behavior. There was, for example, a faraway aunt who was one of my mother's lesser sisters. She had 9 sisters. My father had 11 siblings. They were Catholic, big Catholic families. I have 53 first cousins. I don't speak to any of them. It's really fine. It's really fine. If you knew them, you'd understand. There's a section called If You Met My Family, You'd Understand. I love my brother. I have other people. I have good people in my life. The cousins, not so much. After not speaking to the aunt for months, I couldn't get her on the phone one day. I was certain she died. I went to the library and found a number for my cousin who lived in a distant city and called him weeping. I observed him. Of course my aunt was fine. Eventually it turned into one of those funny family stories, eventually. When I was in the middle of it though, I felt I was smashing against the corners of an unfamiliar room. I was afraid of people coming near me with a net, even if they looked benevolent, with a safety net tightened into a snare. It's not surprising that inexplicably weeping, shivering, frantic girl drove many good-hearted people away. Nevertheless, there were others who persuaded me to accept help. Focused on fear, I saw only blank walls, but these teachers, these friends, these parents of other friends offered me their most effective methods of extraction. So I learned to see clear skies and a way out, grateful to be able to replace the exhausting and compulsive need to flee with an invigorating and resilient passion for flight. Thank you. One last bit, which is about the idea that you have to find the funny story in everything. So I won't read the essay, but I'll tell you about it. Okay. It's an essay on how social media, right, it's on Facebook particularly, it's the same, whatever social media you're using this last 20 minutes, because it keeps changing. And the pictures you see of everybody looks glamorous, everybody looks glorious, everybody's, the head of whatever team they're on, they're always winning, everybody's fabulous. And I thought, what if you saw the pictures from everybody's worst moments in life? What if that's what came up on social media? Because my husband and I were driving across the country. And again, I'm from New York, so I'd never seen America. So we drove across the country. He's from New Jersey, so we didn't know it either. So we get to a place in California, Northern California, and we check into because it's 6 o'clock on a Sunday night, it's getting dark, we check into a cheap hotel really cheap hotel. Like there are seagulls outside the dumpster that are sort of banging into the walls, like it's a Hitchcock movie. There is, we get into the room, one room that like got with a real key, and it has like a shag rug that's 8 inches deep, which clearly has its own ecosystem. It could be a scene from Jackass, someone could walk across it. And the only decorations are clown prints, faces of clowns that are faded. And the faces of the clown prints are bolted to the wall. So that means some other guests had tried to take them home. It's like, whoa, I have to bring those clown prints to my own place because I'll never find. There were no glasses, no tumblers, not even glass ones, not even paper cups. There was there was nothing, right? 2 beds with like polyester bedspreads that were so slippery that you fell off, like you ended up in the shag rugs. And so my husband says he could see my expression. There's a air conditioner and it's blasting. It sounds like there's 747 coming in. He sees my face. He sees I'm not happy, but it's too late to keep driving. It's pouring. He says, I'll go find us food. That usually makes me happy. So I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, and again, I'm over 21, so I open the bottle of wine. And I'm sitting, because there were no cups, so I'm sitting on the edge of the polyester bedspread, drinking bottle directly from the bottle, looking at the clown print, right? While seagulls are smashing it. And I'm thinking, I've been to school for 118 years for this experience. This is my finest moment, And then my husband comes back. Good-natured man, another professor, retired professor from UConn. He comes in and says, well, I got something. And I was like, yeah, what'd you get? He said, well, the deli didn't look so hot, so I didn't want to get any of the meats or like tuna salad or egg salad. He said, I got potato salad. I said, and? No, potato salad. I said, we've been driving 8 hours, you got us potato salad? He said, yep, I got us potato salad. So I'm taking another swig from sitting on the end. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. So he's, we get out the bag, so gets the thing of potato salad. I said, cutlery? I said, oh. I forgot the cutlery. The place was closing. I said, right. Here's this moment. It's in the book. Michael looks up, smart guy from New Jersey. Looks up, goes, I have a shoehorn. Can't make it up. I have a shoehorn. My husband and I are sitting at the edge of the bed looking at the clown print, birds smashing at the window, passing a plastic container of potato salad back and forth that we're eating with a shoehorn. I thought, that's the picture, that I want to picture. I want looking at the clown with a clown print, with the bottle, with like one eye closed, the potato salad. But the next morning, we got up early. We weren't going to linger. And we drove, and about 20 minutes past where we were staying, there was a field of orchids. And I didn't even know orchids grew in fields. I just thought they were fake ones that grew at like TJ Maxx. There were real ones that they grew in fields. And we never would have, if we kept driving, if we said we're not going to stay in this place, this is too awful, this is too depressing, this is too, you just got potato salad, we have to go to the Red Robin. We would have missed those fields of orchids. So it's like, you have to find the story. Right? Because if you tell the story, you can redeem the worst of those moments. You can redeem the clown print moment. So you have to look at the moments that you write down in your books that you think, boy, this is terrible. One day, they'll be at the heart of what you write. Thank you.